I'm here in beautiful Brisbane, Australia, the host city for the 2014 G20 Summit. For those of you out there who don't know, the G20 is a meeting of the 20 largest economies in the world. The leaders and representatives of these countries come together to discuss the future of the world. Obviously, for some people, this raises a lot of concerns because a lot of things have been happening lately in Brisbane and they're going to inconvenience a lot of people. Police have announced anarchist groups like the Black Rose Syndicate have threatened to cause mayhem and riots. Joining me to discuss these important issues is Ethan Nash of We Are Change Brisbane and TOTTNews. So my first question is, this so far has many of the same earmarks as the Toronto G20. Effectively, for the duration of the G20 in Toronto, it became a civil rights-free zone. Liberties were arbitrarily suspended, and it was the largest mass arrest in Canadian history. It was documented in great detail by a group called Press for Truth in a film called Into the Fire. Do you notice any similarities between the way things have unfolded so far in Brisbane and what transpired in Toronto?
Oh, definitely. I've watched Into the Fire and I've spoke to Dan Dix on a couple of occasions, and you mentioned that there was a civil rights free zone in Canada during the Toronto G20, and we have something similar over here. The exclusion zone. There's going to be an exclusion zone around the city that's going to block most of the city out and back up to about Spring Hill as well. While you're in that security zone, a lot of the draconian laws that have been enforced by police in the lead up to the G20 are going to be in play.
Could you talk in greater detail about the rights and freedoms that Brisbane residents will have to sacrifice and how this affects the Australian Constitution?
Well, when the G20 was announced, they were quickly to discuss the G20 Safety and Security Bill 2013. I went to a public forum that they had, and the justification for some of the laws that are in this were based on preventing some of the violence and the outbreaks. The Toronto G20, when a lot of the viewers and yourself and I know that most of that was a result of the establishment itself. While in the exclusion zone, the police have the ability to strip search you. There's 3 searches that they can do that you can't refuse or you'll be detained. There's a basic search, there's a frisk search, and then there is a strip search. They can strip search you on the spot, and if you refuse, you'll be detained. And there's going to be a lockdown on the city where people are not allowed to leave their houses. Works are going to be shut down. They actually made a public holiday just for this event. So people are basically going to be trapped in their house if they're in the exclusion zone. Surveillance drones were announced beforehand to prevent crime, and it's costing us taxpayers $30 an hour for drones to be flying around to prevent crime ahead of it. Police will have the power to search and detain any vehicle, give any road instructions that they want. Police will be able to ditch their name tags during the summit, and this is a real big one that I thought, because you can't get the names of the people. If there's any unjust laws, if there's any actions that they take, you can't get their names, and they're going to be able to refuse to tell you what their names are. People will be able to search houses in the security zone. I could literally go on forever.
So in other words, the Constitution is being violated in a number of ways.
But one thing that the Constitution does say is the governments have to serve in the best interests of the people, and that's one of the most important things that's not being followed here. It's being violated in the Constitution because this isn't serving the best interests of the people. This is serving the best interests of the leaders that are going to be here. By disrupting everything, by enforcing all of these laws, they're violating the Constitution just doing that. So it's very distressing to a lot of people that are going to be living here.
I agree. Ethan, with ISIS front and center in the media, terrorism is on everyone's minds. Recently here, we had a foiled ISIS beheading plot in Brisbane and Sydney, allegedly. I just want to get your opinion. Do you think that this is a false flag style psyops, or is it a genuine threat, or is it a little bit of both?
Personally, I think it's more of a psyop, because this propaganda has been completely evident and has been used to justify some of all of these atrocious things that have come out in the last 2 weeks in this country. And I think it's troubling that people aren't even questioning these things, because some of the articles don't have any sources, don't have any references, videos, anything to prove it, to justify this. For those in Canada that don't understand what's happening in Australia with ISIS right now, they say that there is an ISIS high-ranking member who was a former King's Cross nightclub bouncer who went over there, and now they're in Australia trying to get funding and trying to recruit fighters to head over there. So in light of this, and in light of ISIS, these beheading videos that have have appeared online, ASIO decided to raise the terror level threat to high. And as a result of that, the country just went into complete lockdown. This was all based on Prime Minister Tony Abbott saying there was no specific intelligence of a plot to mount a terrorist attack. So right from the get-go, no specific intelligence. We do have intelligence that there are people with the intent and capability to mount attacks. So that's all they're basing this on, is intent and the capability. All of a sudden, bins in Brisbane were completely welded shut. Police squadrons were put onto the streets to patrol. Bag searches were beginning to be rolled out. Over 800 officers raid houses across 2 states for suspected terrorist attacks. And this is all on the news, in your face. And most of them actually got released because it was only alleged, but no one's reporting on that. I'd like to refer people to an article on my website, TOTTnews.com, called Analysing Mass Media, Fear and Manipulation. And it talks about how the media reinforce public opinion, entice fear to manipulate public opinion, and then it serves their own agenda as a result. Parliament House was apparently under attack. Tony Abbott said that there was chatter of a terrorist attack, completely unjustified. It's pretty disgusting to me that all of a sudden now there's security all around. You're getting searched at Parliament House just because of some chatter. Then Tony Abbott said, anyone with a knife, iPhone, and a victim is a threat in the country.
And a victim?
And a victim on the street to behead.
Oh. Okay.
Anyone with a knife, an iPhone to film it, and a victim for a target, they could carry it out. So everyone could be a terrorist now. Fear, fear, fear. The Australian Federal Police can preemptively detain people without charge to prevent terrorism, what they deem as terrorism. They can preemptively detain you. Now the Victorian Police can hack into computers. They can add content, modify content, or delete content if it's to prevent terrorism.
So they could frame you.
Exactly. They can add content onto you to frame you if they feel it's to detain terrorism. More police, armed police are going to be in Brisbane from here on out while the terrorist threat remains high, and pat-downs are going to become a regular thing. So it's essentially we are just walking straight into a police state. The Office of National Assessments, which is our peak intelligence organisation, is recruiting personnel to search social media for extremist terrorist threats. Now Tony Abbott, because of this, stood up in Parliament and said the fine line between freedom and security is going to have to shift because we have direct threats in our country. Everyone's a terrorist. ISIS are coming for you. We need to spy on you. We need to put this police state in place. And that's what has got people so wound up, because now the G20 is going to be an absolute just nightmare. They passed new terrorism legislation where ASIO are able to be not criminally liable for actions that they do as long as it doesn't cause death, serious harm, or sexual matters, which doesn't include, ruining your family, bankruptcy, psychological torture. Journalists and whistleblowers that reveal sensitive material can now be put in jail for a 10-year sentence, which is absolutely unprecedented in this country. ASIO don't have a cap on the amount of wiretaps that they can have from a single warrant. So essentially, when you look at it, they can monitor the entire Australian internet. And all of this that I've mentioned was based on some hearsay threats of the potential of a terrorist attack, and it's just a complete rollout of all of our freedoms being taken.
Yeah, they always say you have to give up your freedom for security, but that's the opposite of how it works. Your freedom keeps you safe.
Exactly, as history has shown, when people lose their rights, people are in trouble.
I wanted you to speak briefly for a minute on the bikie laws that have been recently implemented under the guise of preventing biker gangs. What I understand is that these laws, not only do they implicate bikies, but they have a lot of widespread implications for normal members of the public. Could you talk about how the bikie laws have been insidiously expanded to affect everyone?
Well, before ISIS were over here, bikies were the boogeyman here in Brisbane. Bikies are going to take over. Bikies are the criminals that are going to disrupt all of your life. And they use this as a pretext to pass the Vicious Lawless Association De-Establishment Bill 2013. The name is just as confusing as the legislation itself. Now, they said that this is going to be to crack down on bikies, but when you actually read the legislation itself, it caused a lot of uproar between people because it's association with a criminal organisation. For example, if a bikie steals a car, it's his first conviction. Under this law, because he's associated with them, he will face a mandatory 15 years in prison. But the real issue about this is what association with an organisation is. An organisation in this, under Section 3, is defined, it could be defined as a league, it can be defined as a social club, an organisation, and the most important part under D is any group of people in 3 or more that are informally or formally associated, whether legally or illegally, with suspected criminal organizations can be arrested under this. So
it's pretty vague and ambiguous, and this could include your lawyer.
Yes, say if you had a lawyer that was associated, he could be targeted too. But even just basic things, if you could get arrested, who dictates what suspected means? The police, which are obviously exempt from this legislation, ironically. They're the ones that dictate it, and where's the protection, where's the liability to stop from fabrication, from basic lies to get protesters off the street during the G20, because this is where it's going to affect most of us, because most of us are going to be peaceful demonstrators, and it's going to be a threat to them.
Moving now into the topic of agent provocateurs. It has been well documented in Canada and the United States that police actually send fake protesters out into crowds at protests, and these fake protesters cause violence or throw Molotov cocktails, and this is used as a justification to shut down the entire peaceful protest. There was a famous case that was documented in Montebello, Quebec, and basically exactly that happened. Police were caught red-handed inciting violence.
In 2007, in August, in Montebello, Quebec, were fed up with this 2.5-year-old trade deal, going forward and merging every aspect of their society and harmonizing the regulations to the lowest possible standards according to what corporations want. They were sick and tired of the information not being given out to the public, not being openly shared, and of not being given any input into what was happening with respect to this massive trade deal. So they massed in Montebello what looked to be about 1,000, 1,500 protesters. There was a security perimeter around the meeting, and there was incredible police presence there. And at one point, the police were even caught infiltrating the protest by 3 giant, muscle-bound, supposedly anarchists, wearing masks and holding rocks. Were threatening to throw the rocks at the police.
No! Put the rock down, man!
A union leader stepped up and said, "Take off your masks, put down those rocks, you're not with us."
You're a fucking cop, the 3 of you! Go on, it's our line! These 3 guys are cops, everybody!
Eventually they ripped the masks off the guys, and the guys dove behind the police line. And that was all. It was caught on tape. It was exposed. They were exposed as infiltrators because they were wearing the same boots as the officers who arrested them. Plus, of course, who dives behind a police line for protection if you're a protester? It's something that most protesters would be scared to do, to dive into a bunch of police who are there, menacingly, staring at them.
As we confirmed yesterday, the 3 people in question were indeed suited Quebec police officers performing their duties.
It always seems to be these black bloc style protesters inciting the riots, and the agent provocateurs are always clad in black, and it just seems to me like it's a little too convenient that the Black Rose Syndicate would make threats to cause violence at the summit, and it would be highlighted by the media and then used as further justification for the security crackdown. Do you have concerns in this regard? Are agent provocateurs operating in Australia?
I do have a lot of concern about it because, as you said, it's used as a means to shut down peaceful protesters. And the fact that the media gave this group coverage is clear evidence that they could potentially be agent provocateurs. Because I know a lot of protesters, and about 95% of them, they're going out, they're going to be peaceful. They've stated that they're going to be peaceful. I'm not going to be causing any harm. I'm not going to be doing anything illegal. But as soon as an agent provocateur, which is well documented, as you've said, and I've seen some of those agent provocateurs actually, there's been footage of them undressing afterwards. Yeah. I've seen some of them, and it's well documented around the world. And here in the G20, I've no doubt in my mind, because they need this. They need this because if there's so much fear, if there's so much unjust laws in place, and then the protesters are peaceful, doesn't make a good image. The media would immediately cover any black bloc protesters, any agent provocateurs that
to paint the whole thing in a negative light.
And that's all they would focus on, just as they did in Canada. So I have no doubt that they're going to be there, and I'll be out there to film them and try and expose them to the rest of the world.
Do you think that they hold the G20 in major cities for the purpose of the security lockdown as kind of a martial law training drill?
Yes, absolutely. In Brisbane, there's no reason to have a summit like this in a major city. They could have it on an island. There's There's no justification to actually have it in a city rather than to have the people come out and to enforce under all of these unjust laws. And with the VLAD laws, the security bill, the new anti-terror legislation, they have pushed this through, and now they need the people in the streets to provoke them, to to cause up a storm, to have agent provocateurs. They need this to push their agenda. They need this to roll out the police state.
To practice their tactics.
That's exactly right.
We're going to have to wrap it up now, but thanks for everything,
no
Ethan.
worries. Thank you very much.
And we'll,
TOTTnews.com.
And we'll see you at the event.
Thank you.